are not IRS agents, okay? This is not a governmental tax. This is a religious tax. And you know, that's hard for us to get our minds around. These are not Zacchaeus or Matthew. These are something different. These are the tax collectors from the temple, because everything in the temple, all the temple bureaucracy, if you will, everything that made it run had to be paid for some way, and the way it was paid for was through a required temple tax. Jason. Yes, it was more a tax and less a tithe. They still asked for the tithe, but the tax was required. And so, yeah, it was kind of a forced tithe. Now, they don't come to Jesus. They go to Peter. Why do you think they do that? Why don't they go to Jesus? Come on, this is a softball. Yeah. Yeah, he can answer them too easily and well. They're a little bit intimidated. In the past, when they've come at Jesus with questions, it hasn't gone real well for them. And so it's much, they want Peter to mess up, right? It's like those press secretaries we're talking about. I mean, who would want that job? You walk out into a room full of professional writers who are doing everything they can to make you say something stupid. That's their whole job. They want you to say something stupid so they can put a big headline and get you fired. That's pretty much the way that job works. I don't know how anybody would want to do that job. But that's what's happening here. They want Peter to mess up. They want him to say something stupid. Now, they ask if Jesus pays the tax, and Peter says, sure does. But this is Peter. And we know that Peter in crisis will lie to protect himself. And so we don't really know, did Jesus really pay the tax or did he not? Peter's been with him a couple of years at this point, so he's seen him go through a couple of seasons when he would have paid the tax. So we can give them the benefit of the doubt and say that, yes, Jesus has probably paid it in the past. But we don't know that, and it is Peter. And I can see Peter going, yeah, sure, he does. Let's go with that. Yeah, whatever. Peter didn't control the money and probably didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. And so, you know, I can see Peter going, yeah, sure, whatever you say. He does that. And so then this is where it gets interesting. Watch this. When Peter came into the house, Jesus was the first to speak. What do you think, Simon? He asked. From whom do the kings of earth collect duty and taxes? From their own children or from others? From others, Peter answered. Now, it's like they were already talking about this, right? You know, like we're in a room and we're talking about taxes, right? And we're talking about paying the temple tax. And Cody walks in and I go, well, let's see what Cody has to say. Cody, what do you? That's what it looks like, right? Jesus just throws this question at him like they had already been talking about it, like Jesus had already set this up. You know, you've heard me say 100 times, I think Jesus is the coolest person that ever lived. And so he's got this, it's all set up. And Peter walks in, and he knows where Peter's coming from. He knows the question he was just asked. And so he says, hey, let's see what Simon thinks. And you notice, he changed his name not long ago, but here he uses his Jewish name because we're talking about a Jewish tax that has to do with the Jewish religion. So I'm telling you, Jesus is smooth. He knows what he's doing. Let's see what Simon has to say. Simon, what do you think? Now, if I'm Peter, I'm totally weirded out at this moment, right? Because you know where you came from, and you know you were just asked this question, and you walk in the room, and Jesus starts asking you about taxes, and you got to be going, whoa. What did I mess up? Did I say something I wasn't supposed to say? Did I do something? He just had this weird conversation with the tax people, and then he walks into the place where they're staying, and Jesus is talking about taxes, and if I'm Peter, I'm freaking out a little bit. Now, the question that I want us to look at, though, is what point is Jesus trying to make with this question? Look at the question again. The question he asks, from whom do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes? From their own children or from others? what's the point of that question? What's he trying to get to? He's gonna tell us in just a minute. I mean, right here in the next few verses. But what's the point here? Why ask that question? Nobody? Crickets. Tim? Go for it. I don't have anything in mind, so you can't be wrong. Maybe, yeah. That for those of you at home, Tim said, maybe he's trying to say that they should not be imposing this tax. This was his father's house. So the children thing is important here. The idea that children, I mean, it's in a kingdom, the prince and the princess are not paying taxes, right? They're benefiting from the taxes that come into the king, but they're not paying them. And so pick it up there. Look at what Jesus says. Then the children are exempt, Jesus said to him. But so that we may not cause offense, go to the lake and throw out your line. Take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you'll find a 4 drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and yours. So Jesus is saying, I shouldn't have to pay taxes to my Father. And I think carrying over by proxy, Paul's going to say that we've been made co-heirs with Christ. We shouldn't have to pay taxes to our Father. Now, look at what he says here. Verse 27, but so that we may not cause offense. Now that's weird. And here's why that's weird. We've been in this for almost 18 chapters now. Have we ever seen Jesus worried about causing offense at all? No. That's never been a consideration for anything that he does. In fact, you could make the argument that sometimes he causes offense on purpose because he wants to stir the pot. And so why now? What makes this question different? Why now is he going to say, so that we may not cause offense? Don't want to offend God? Okay. Maybe he's not talking about that. Maybe he's talking about Mike. Okay, but it is a religious tax. This is a temple tax. Yeah, and so, but yes, you're right. It's not really about spiritual matters as far as my relationship with God. It's more about temple bureaucracy. Yes. Right. And truthfully, it's like churches today, if we were all tithing appropriately, we wouldn't have to, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not talking about, that's my argument with social justice is, and everybody's like the government needs to do this or that. Well, no, the church needs to do that. And so we as churches have failed. That's our job. Carrie, you had your hand up. Okay. So as not to make them angry. Again, though, why? Why do we not want to make them angry? Cody?
I think you wanted to show you wanted to do it out of charity and goodwill instead of an obligation.
Okay.
Trying to show us an example here where we're obligated to put out money and are we able to pay things?
I can buy that. Cody said for those of you at home that maybe he's trying to show us that it's better to make that offering out of charity, out of goodwill, rather than out of obligation. I buy that. Kara? Maybe it's a picking your battles kind of thing. I think that's a definite possibility because he knows where he's going. He knows what's coming. He knows, at this point, you can make the argument before this, how much did he actually know and when did he actually know it? But I'm pretty sure after the transfiguration, because once the transfiguration happens, he's dead set on heading to the cross. There's not much wavering. I mean, he has a destination in mind, and I think it's not time for the fight yet. You know what I'm saying? We're not trying to make them mad yet. We're going to, and we're going to give them offense, and we're going to make them so offended they're going to want to kill me. But it's not time for that yet. So let's focus in on what we're doing. He tells Peter, this is awesome. Go throw your net in the lake. How are you going to pay taxes? You're going to go catch a fish, because that's what you do. Go throw your net in the lake, and the first fish you pull in, open its mouth, and there you'll find a coin. And I mean, if you're Peter, what is your mind doing right now, right? Because, I mean, look at this sequence of events. These guys approach you on the street. Does Jesus pay tax? Sure, yeah, he does, whatever you say. And then he walks in the house, and Jesus says, Simon, what do you think about taxes? And he's like, I guess that they're exempt. And Jesus goes and says all this and says, now go fishing and go pay the tax. And if you're Peter, you just got to be going, what just happened to me? Because it's just like bam, 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 mind blown. He tells Peter, go throw his net in the lake, and he'll find a coin. And he's to take that and pay what? Whose taxes? Jesus and Peter's. What about the other guys? Why don't the other guys, why aren't there more coins? They got to go catch their own fish? They have their own money? Okay. Here's a little Bible nerd stuff for you. This is one of the reasons that a lot of scholars believe that most of the apostles, except for Peter, were very, very young. Like teenage kind of young. The age for the temple tax is 20 years old. That's the required age. We know Peter is the only one that's married because, I mean, if you read back, he had a mother-in-law, and nobody gets one of those by choice. I'm sorry, not by choice, by without getting married. That was bad. My mother-in-law's in the hospital, and I did not mean that bad. The 2 drachma tax had been collected since Moses' time, and it was every male over the age of 20. That was the required age. And so you can make the case that the rest of these guys didn't have to pay a temple tax. The only ones who were over 20 was Jesus and Peter. They were the only ones that were required to pay a temple tax. Now, if you get that, if I get that in my head, it helps explain a lot. Because if James and John are 18 years old, then it explains the impetuousness of why when Jesus walks by and says, come follow me, they just jump out of the boat. Because that's what 18-year-olds do, right? They just do whatever's in front of them. It explains the hot-headedness of why you would be called sons of thunder. It explains a lot of the things that maybe a more seasoned adult would understand. Okay, is that Matthew had a job, but that still doesn't mean that he was in that society, he was a man at 12. And so it's not like we're putting our 21st century lenses on it. It's not, he could have held a job at 13. Yeah. Jesus never touches the money. He always sends somebody else. He has Judas taking care of the purse, and Peter goes to pay the tax. And why do you think that is? I mean, think about it. If most of your mega church things, that we look at now and go, kind of roll our eyes at, it looks like a money grab. Jesus is absolutely not concerned about money at all. I mean, like literally, like the dude didn't even have a house, right? I mean, he cares nothing at all. You want to talk about having your mind set on things above and not on things below. Jesus is the epitome of that. He doesn't have a home. He doesn't go to the grocery store. He doesn't. Literally, I'm being a little bit, but seriously, Jesus doesn't worry about any of that stuff at all. Jason, did you have your hand up? A rabbi? No. In fact, we'll see other places where there's a group of people that follow him and support him. A lot of women who follow him and support him. I know that's not popular. We're not supposed to say that, but that's the way Jesus did things. Which was, again, crazy because women weren't allowed to be educated. And so for a rabbi to be teaching women was ridiculously unheard of. That's the whole thing with Mary and Martha and Mary, in there sitting at Jesus' feet. Martha's not just worried about housework. She's worried about Mary not performing her role as a woman that she's supposed to perform in society. She's not doing what she's supposed to be doing. She's stepping outside of her role. I'm rabbit trailing desperately bad. But
These women that followed him had money
yes.
from somewhere.
And we don't know where, we don't know how, we don't know. There's a lot of questions. But come back to because I want you to get one more thing. Why this is important. The other apostles being young. Here's why this is important. Because one of the arguments you're going to hear nowadays, you hear it a lot. I've seen it online multiple times in the last few weeks as I was looking at things. Is one of the arguments is, well, most of the people who wrote the Bible didn't even know Jesus. They weren't even around Jesus because Jesus died in AD 33, and the Gospels were written in 70 or 80 or maybe as late as 90, and so that's a big year span, and so these people didn't even know Jesus. But then you look at if John was 17, and he wrote his Gospel in AD 33, and he wrote his Gospel in AD 90, how old is he? Mathematicians? Come on, I got to get out a calculator, y'all. Y'all going to have to help me. If he's 17 and 33, how old is he in 90? (17 plus 64). Okay. 64-year-old. I'm not going to make you raise your hand, but if you're 64... are you able to remember things that happened when you were 17, 18? Yeah. And so John, it's not that big of a leap. It's not as big a leap as some of the secular people will try to convince you that it is. That John, who walked with Jesus, Matthew, who walked with Jesus, could have written their Gospels that much later and still been the same people. Stupendous, life-changing. Think about some of the biggest moments that happened when you were 17 or 18, right? You can still remember those vividly. And I would say that probably somebody walking on water, maybe transfiguration, that would stick in your mind, right? And so it's a pretty big deal because of these arguments But okay, so that's the Bible nerd rabbit trail. Here's the bigger concept, okay? Jesus says the children don't have to pay the tax, but he does so as not to create a misunderstanding, not to create friction. But the bottom line is as children of God, this is why Jesus came. As children of God, we should not have to pay to enter into the presence of our Father. As children of God, we should not have to pay to worship God. But there is a tax. There's always some kind of tax. The only difference is that just like Peter, Jesus pays our tax. That'll preach right there, right? That Jesus is going to pay my tax. Jesus is going to pay my entry into the Father's presence. Now, that's again, this is why, I mean, you've heard me say this probably from the pulpit. If you haven't, you will. But the whole Church of the Future nonsense drives me insane. because there is no, you must be this old to ride this ride on the Holy Spirit. There's nothing that says that. In fact, I can make the case that God uses young people a lot more than he does people my age in the Bible. Look at who he picks. He picks the very young and the very old. I mean, I'm just saying. He picks the Davids and the Josephs and the young people, or he picks the Moses and the Nehemiah and the 80-year-old people. That's generally who he picks. And so the idea that we tell our teenagers or our youth or our young people, oh, well, you're the church of the future. You just have to wait until you're old enough. That's not scriptural. And that's us taking a little 21st century thing and putting it on the Bible. So I say that to say, encourage these young people. Lift them up. When you see them here, lift them up. When they're here for, whatever they're here for, I don't care. They're here. They have a lot of choices, a lot more choices than you and I ever did of places they can be. And they choose to be here. They choose to be, a lot of them. There are a number of students in our youth ministry now whose parents are not members of this church. Those kids are choosing to be here of their own volition. They don't have a car. They don't have a driver's license. They make their parents drive them here. They're parents who don't want to stay. Not judging the parents, but I am saying that's some faith. And we need to be lifting that up. We need to be blessing that. We need to be supporting and encouraging and pumping that up. Sorry, that sermon was for free. And when you do, listen, they're going to roll their eyes. That's what teenagers do. They're going to roll their eyes. They're going to say something smart aleck, or they're going to, whatever. But don't worry about it. It still goes in there. And even no matter how they act, if you say, really glad to see you this morning, I'm glad you're here, they're going to go, okay. And then they're going to giggle when they walk off, and you're going to think, well, they didn't even care. But they do. They just have to put on that front and act like they're cool. And so don't let that discourage you. Cody? Good point. Right. And I don't like to throw rocks at other people, but we will not sell tickets, not to worship. I can see some, if we sold tickets one time when we had a drama presentation on the stage or something like that. And I don't know all the ins and outs and the workings of other places and why they do things the way they do, and they may have some kind of system set up that I don't understand. But as far as us, no, I agree with you. I don't think there's a. I don't know. And I can't judge other people. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with them and with their head, and I don't get into that. I don't care. It's not my job. I got enough trouble worrying about Jeff. I'm not trying to be flippant, but you get it. Now look at 18. At that time, the disciples come to Jesus and ask him, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And you read this and you go, how can you dare ask this question? The audacity that you would come and ask this question. I mean, really. The idea that you would say, well, it just once again shows they don't get it. They're trying to figure out who's going to be Secretary of State. They're trying to figure out who's going to be the provincial governor of Capernaum. That's what they're looking for here. This is not about that they're thinking about heaven and angels and all that kind of. They're not thinking about any of that stuff. They're thinking about when you as a Messiah, when you overtake and kick out the Romans and assume your place of ruling, which one of us is going to be the greatest? Who's going to be your right hand? Because you just gave Peter a miraculous thing of money, and he went off, and I I didn't get in on that, and I want to know: does that mean he's higher ranking than me? Who's the greatest? And I can see Jesus almost sigh. I mean, he doesn't. He doesn't say that. That's Jeff's imagination. Take that for what it's worth. But
When they say the disciples, do we ever know who?
we don't know. We know that when it says the apostles, they're just talking about the 12. And so the disciples could be including everybody. It could be including more than just the 12. It could be including those women that we're talking about that supported him. It could be including some others that are not named among the apostles. And so we don't know. And anybody who tells you they do know is making that up because the Bible doesn't say. It doesn't give us a specific delineation of these are who the disciples are. Verse 2, he called a little child to him and placed the child among them. He's going to do a little object lesson here and say, truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, and whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. So, now there's a couple of interesting things here. Jesus doesn't rebuke them for wanting to be great. You notice that? He doesn't say, you shouldn't want that. You should want to be. That's not what he says. He says, you want to be great? This is how you're going to be great. How are you going to be great? By humbling yourselves, by changing and becoming like a child. Now, what does he mean? What does he mean becoming like a child? Jerry? Okay. Yeah, the trust that a child has for the parents or grandparents. Nick, do you have your hand up? Pure. The innocence, right? I mean, I don't know, as a parent, it breaks my heart every time I see something happen and I see them lose a little bit of that. You know what I mean? Because the world's trying to take it away from them all the time. And it happens all the time, and it's little bitty things that you don't think about, but you can see it happening. Miss Pat?
There's got to be a little bit more to it because children can be the meanest,
That's true.
untrustworthy. If you think about the things that you are trying to teach your little child,
Right.
and they can be so stubborn. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. I do.
Little children are not pure and unsinful.
No, I understand. I have this thing on my phone that shows me the memories from past posts and whatnot. I had one on here from yesterday where I posted getting a preteen girl dressed and off to school in the morning makes me understand why animals eat their young. But for real, so yes, I get exactly what you're saying, that children are not always, so yes and no. So that there is more to it than that, because children can also be some of the meanest people on the street. Jason, then Cody.
I think you kind of summed it up in verse 6, because whoever calls these little ones, believe in me and sin, it would be better for him if a millstone hung around his neck and were drowned in the depths of the sea.
Okay.
He's saying,
Don't corrupt.
let them be little children.
Okay. Cody, is that what you were going to say?
Talk about as a newborn child being converted into a spiritual baptized.
Okay. Being a child of God by being born again. Okay, I buy that. I saw hands over here. Julie and then Kara. Ooh, okay. kids are very much more accepting and open to other kids, and they don't learn to section off until they get older. I'm just restating for the folks at home so that they hear what you said. Kara? Right. Yeah. No, I get that. And as a little child, your world kind of revolves around that parent. That that's everything. Courtney and then Tim. Absolutely. That the faith of a child is much stronger than those of us who have become a little bit more cynical and jaded. I buy that wholeheartedly. Tim? Right. Who's the greatest? Especially in that culture. What we don't get, we live on this side of Jesus, and so we don't get how in that culture, I mean, we think abortion is bad in the United States. In that culture, you could kill them up to about 6 and it was okay. I'm not exaggerating a bit. Um, Maybe even worse if it was girls. And I mean, now Jews were a little bit different because they clung to Yahweh and to the Scripture, but they weren't immune from it. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. I don't know if we'll make it today, but that they participated in it too. I mean, go back into First and Second Kings and look at Ahaz and Manasseh and some of those guys. They weren't immune from it, but they did. But the idea that children have value primarily comes from post-Christian countries, post-Christian nations, post-Christian rules and regulations and stuff. That's something that changes after Jesus. Hang on, I got to go to Chris because he had his hand up, or maybe you were just scratching your head. I don't know. Okay. Right. Wow. Right. Doing something that causes them to lose trust can be corrupting them. That corrupting is more than just causing to sin. I'm restating for the folks at home that you can cause them to lose their innocence simply by doing something that causes them to lose that faith or to lose that trust. You still have something, Cody? Right. The Greek word that my version translates converted, I don't know what yours calls it. It's strepho, and it means to turn back or to turn around. So he says, unless you turn back and become like children. Now, in the context of being the greatest, he says, unless you, I mean, look at what he says specifically. Therefore, whoever does what? Takes the lowly position of this child. Instead of jockeying for greatness, you need to be down here to where, in Roman society, children were below slaves as far as value. And it's really hard for us to get our 21st century American minds wrapped around that. But when he's saying, slaves were property and they had value, and so you would buy and sell. The children, I can make another one of them. That's not that big a deal. I'm not kidding. And so for us to get that, you're going to be converted and take the lowly position. Instead of jockeying for, hey, everybody, look at me and how great I am, you need to be down here. You need to be humbling yourself, to be converted, to turn back to the bottom. And that's how you become great, Jesus says. The greatness is found in becoming. So then verse 6, let's start into this. We got a few more minutes. If anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me. Now notice, he makes a qualification here. We're shifting. We're not just talking about children anymore. We're talking about once you have changed and become like children. If anyone causes one of these little ones, the ones who believe in me, the ones who are changing and becoming like children, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. There were two types of millstones. There was the kind that they used at home, and then there was the big gigantic one that was turned by a donkey. That's the word he uses. He uses the one that meant the giant, humongous millstone that had to be turned by livestock because it was so big. Okay? So you want to get that picture. You can Google millstone, ancient Judean millstone. Google that and you'll get pictures of this thing. It's this giant donut that they would put on this thing, and it would turn so that it could grind the stuff. Big old, gimongous, heavy stone. And Jesus is saying, if you're going to cause somebody, one of these who believe in me, and this is another one of those both and things, not just the children, but the ones who have changed and become like children, the little ones. He's not just talking about children. He's talking about believers. He's calling us children. That if you're going to cause one of them to stumble, to fall, it's better for you to be drowned in the depths of the sea. That's pretty harsh, right? That's not, everybody says, oh, Jesus was such a good teacher and he just taught love and happiness. You haven't read the Bible. Because Jesus taught some pretty hard stuff. And Jesus was not afraid to use some pretty graphic, violent language. And he's going to get even worse. He's going to double down. And he's just getting warmed up right here. He's going to start cutting off body parts here in a minute. Because he's just getting warmed up. And this is, this applies to those who would abuse children. And so I'm not taking that away. But it also applies to those who would abuse disciples. That's why this is significant. We in Huntsville, Texas, we don't live in a society of unchurched. Now, it's getting that way, but not as much. We don't live in a society of unchurched as much as we live in a society of post-church. People that grew up in church and for whatever reason were turned away or were abandoned or were abused or were forsaken or were ostracized or whatever, and they've turned their back on the church because of the behavior of the church towards them at some point in their life. Now, here's the deal. Jesus says, you're going to cause somebody, now listen, stumble is not just being offended. It's not somebody hurt my feelings. It's not somebody's doing something I don't like, okay? This is causing someone to fall away from faith. It's better for you to be drowned. That's the best case scenario. Mary? Ooh, okay. Absolutely. It is so difficult. I'm going to piggyback. Absolutely. Mary said, for those of you at home, it's not just what we do to children, it's what we don't do to children. And this year in your job, you've experienced a lot of children with CPS involvement and how they don't have enough resources. They don't have enough. You're going to hear if you stay around for the corporate meeting today. We have a very good relationship, this church, with CPS, and we do a lot of work with them. And we could spend our entire budget and not take care of all the needs. But we can. That there are needs literally every day, and people who are in need of. And this is not, the panhandler at Walmart. These are good families who are working hard and doing the best they can. Some of them, mom's working 3 jobs by herself, taking care of 5 kids, and she does not have the resources to make it work. And it's getting more and more expensive every day. And so then these people, CPS gets called in by the school for whatever reason. The kids come to school and they haven't been bathed in a week. And so they have to, by law, make that call. CPS comes and says, look, if you don't get your water turned back on, we're going to have to remove these kids from this home. And mom goes, I don't know what to do. And there are a couple of CPS agents who work out of the Huntsville office who will say, here, call this number. Or they will call me and say, we have this case. Can you help? And what I just described to you is a real case where we paid somebody's water so that her water would get cut back on so that she wouldn't lose her children. She was working 2 jobs, doing everything she could, and just overwhelmed. And it wasn't that she was a bad, abusive mom. It was that she was doing everything she could. And so, yeah, I'm rabbit trailing, but I totally agree. I know we're out of time. I got everybody standing out here going, hurry up, Jeff. We're going to stop right here. We're going to come back to this right here next week, because when we get into this, we're going to get real deep here. We're going to talk about millstones and being drowned. We're going to talk about physical dismemberment, and we're going to talk about hell. That's all coming up. So, yeah, don't you want my job? It's going to be fun. So, you got about 12 minutes now because I went long. So, take care of your business, fellowship. Be back in here at 10 o'clock for worship.